Live from the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences in beautiful downtown Raleigh, it's the Science Cafe with your host, Chris Smith.
All right, everybody. Hello, folks. Welcome. Hi, how's everybody doing tonight? It's good to see all of y'all. Thanks for coming out to the Science Cafe. My name is Chris Smith. I am your host for the Science Cafe. Every month on the third Thursday, we gather here in the Daily Planet Cafe, and we meet interesting people who are doing interesting things out there in the worlds of science, nature, art, education, and beyond. They share a little bit of their expertise with us, maybe some fun or fascinating stories, and then we flip the script and we give the microphones to you all, which is scary for them, but great for me, because then you get the chance to have conversation and ask your questions. So right here inside the cafe, right, you can grab some food, delicious food at the Daily Planet Cafe. You can grab a drink, and we can have a great time conversing and conversating about topics that I know we here at the museum like, and that, well, I don't know, y'all are here, you must like these topics too. So I'm going to assume that you're all in for tonight's stories and tonight's special guest. Now, how many of you here at the cafe for tonight's program already know of Dr. Jenny Campbell? Okay, good. So the rest of you are sort of like, I don't know, we always come to the Science Cafe, or I don't know, we saw the topic. How many of you here because you saw tigers? And you were like, yes, cool, awesome. And also all of the people who also know Dr. Campbell. That's cool. Well, we're going to do both those things tonight. I have to say, having Dr. Campbell here at the Science Cafe has been a very, very long time coming, because it turns out that I didn't even realize it when I came here to work at the museum, but I've known Dr. Campbell for a long time. When I worked at the Lemur Center at Duke University in Durham, Dr. Campbell would bring classes up for field trips, and I would be one of the people who would give the tours of the Lemur Center. And so every year we would look forward to the students coming up and Dr. Campbell coming up, and we would be talking about, animal care and zoology and having cool conversations about conservation and lemurs and all that fun stuff. And then I left the Lemur Center, I come here, and one of the very first things that happens is this classroom of students from North Carolina State University comes into the museum one day, being led by Dr. Jenny Campbell. And that's how I knew I was in a great place. Because if Dr. Campbell was there checking out what was going on, then I must be in the right place too. And so it's been years and years and years that we've been like circling in this orbit. And now tonight we finally got it together. And we're going to hear stories and science from Dr. Jenny Campbell. Now, to introduce you to Dr. Campbell is a teaching professor at North Carolina State University and the director of the undergraduate zoology program. And I don't know why there's a tiger cub, but I bet there's a good story. So everybody put your hands together and welcome to the stage, Dr. Jenny Campbell.
Does that work? Cool. Hey everybody. Yep, I'm Dr. Jenny Campbell, and I'm a professor in the Biological Sciences Department at NC State. I also am the director of the zoology program. And how many of you guys have zoo majors? So some of my students are here to support me tonight, which is wonderful. I want to thank Chris in particular for inviting me to come speak, because I like telling stories, but I really like telling stories where I don't have to grade anything later. So I'm super excited to have the opportunity to tell a story and not think about questions that are going to go on the exam. Cool. So I am not a tiger biologist. I'm just going to throw that out there right away. But I have been thinking about tigers for a very long time. The very first ornament I ever got for Christmas from my grandmother was a little tiger ornament, and I still have the ornament today. It's one of my favorites. It's actually so much my favorite that it's not on the tree. It's actually hanging up all year where I can see it. My husband is over there. I don't know. Do you know where it is? No clue? Yeah. Anyway, so my love of tigers, actually animals in general, because I'm a complete animal nerd, like many of you seem to be as well, started very early. And by the time I met Loki, I was pretty much fully immersed in, working with animals, being around animals, learning about animals, etc. So when I was much, much younger, I worked at a place called King's Dominion Wild Animal Park. How many of you have driven up 95, you've gone through Richmond, and then there's kind of nothing for a little while, and then all of a sudden there's that giant sign that says King's Dominion? That's where I worked, and that's where I met Loki. I was there at a time where they still had a monorail. Did anybody in here that's older ever ride that monorail? No? So it was called Lion Country Safari, and you got on the monorail as part of King's Dominion's rides, and you went around through Africa and Asia. And there were a lot of really cool animals that you could see. We had lions, we had zebras, we had rhinos, we had giraffes, and we had tigers. And I was a tiger keeper for a bit. And so I actually find working with tigers kind of boring, because it's pretty much just about whether or not you locked a gate. And that's what you think about most of the time, including like late at night, 2 in the morning. Did I lock that gate? Anyway, so one morning I came in with my coworker to the tiger huts, and there was this female tiger who was acting kind of funny, and walked over, and I took a look, and I noticed this little teeny tiger cub on the floor in the cage. And this concerned me because I had heard that in the past she had not been too kind to cubs. She had actually, it's known as infanticide, and it happens in captivity, where for some reason the mother will consume the cubs. And I know that's really hard to think about, but I saw this living, breathing baby tiger in the cage with her, and I was like, I'm not letting you eat that, essentially. And she wanted to go outside where her boyfriend was, and I was like, I'll open this gate for you if you put the cub down. And she looked at me, and I looked at her, and she looked at me, and I looked at her, and then she kind of went, I was like, all right, let's go. And so the other person opened the gate so she could head outside to be with her boyfriend, Shere Khan. I didn't name him, I promise. Anyway, so now I had this little baby tiger cub, and I was like, oh, what do I do now? So obviously I called and said, hey, we have a tiger cub down at the tiger huts. What do I do? And we pulled this tiger cub, obviously, and we decided to hand rear it, or they decided to hand rear it. And then they allowed me to do the hand rearing. So I took her home with me, and she lived in my house, and I had a pickup truck, and I had a cab on the back, and I had a kennel, and I would drive back and forth from work with her in the kennel, in the pickup truck. And that lasted for a number of weeks until she got to be about 40 pounds, at which point we decided she was large enough that we should leave her at the zoo where the rest of the tigers were. I named her Loki because I knew that Loki was the god of mischief, the Norse god of mischief, not because of Marvel, people. So I was naming her Loki well before, what is his name, the guy that plays Loki? That dude. Yeah, became such a phenomenon. Anyway, so now it's been a long time. I've gotten married. I got a PhD. I became a professor. I'm obviously into other animals. I knew Chris at the Lemur Center. I don't know if you know this, but I was the veterinary technician at the Lemur Center for 4 years before I went back to grad school. And so, but this little Loki, she stayed in my brain, kind of rent-free for a really long time. And I've just been really kind of puzzled my whole life about how it is that this white American girl from Richmond, Virginia, had this opportunity to have a tiger cub in my home. why did that happen? How did that happen? And does it make sense that it happened? So anyway, you ready for the rest of the story? So that picture that you see comes from Etsy. There's this guy on Etsy that makes these beautiful prints for, I guess it's like if you're decorating a nursery for a little kid. And it's T is for tiger. And that's probably going to be the T in most alphabet books, right? And why do you think that is? Why is T how we teach our kids? I mean, why are tigers how we teach our kids the letter T? Yeah, they're so memorable. They're so beautiful. They're so iconic. They're so stripy, right? Yes. Do you want to, Chris? You might need to get a microphone.
They're adorable.
I know. I agree. I totally agree. But what else do we know about tigers?
They're stripy.
They're apex predators. They could kill us in a heartbeat, right? So they're also very dangerous predators. Another question from I Love New York. You what?
I take back the adorable part.
No, I still think you can call them adorable.
I read in Wikipedia that Siberian tigers have been known to imitate the calls of grizzly bears and kill them and eat them.
Wow, I did not know that.
Bad cat.
That is, yeah. Am I allowed to use language? I'd call that a badass cat. Anyway,
Yeah, go for it.
so
There's only a couple of kids here
do you
today.
like how I asked for forgiveness, not permission so much? Actually, both of them. So anyway, alphabet books. And in fact, beyond that, we use animals to teach our kids the letters of the alphabet often. And I find that really fascinating, more beyond just the tiger T. Okay, so the tigers in our lives, probably not what you were expecting. The two on the top, I'm not sure if this is gonna work. Yeah, it does. So this is a newer Kate Spade bag. It's a tiger bag. It's a tiger clutch. And then this is a little bit older Kate Spade bag. I think this one is really cool. If I had a choice, that's the one I would buy, but I can't afford it, so never mind. Anyway, so we've got Kate Spade. We have, who is this? Who can tell me who this tiger is? Right, so that's Raja, who was Jasmine, Princess Jasmine's pet in Aladdin. And, you know, clearly a very friendly, adorable tiger friend. All right, so what about this guy over here? Who's this? That's Tigger. And honestly, as a kid, I related way more to Eeyore than I did to Tigger. So I was always annoyed by Tigger and preferred any Winnie the Pooh stories that didn't involve him. It's true. And what about this guy in the middle? Does anybody know who that is? That's Shere Khan, and where did it come from? Which Shere Khan is that? It is. It's for the live action Jungle Book. You know how Hollywood is doing all these live action films from a lot of the past classics. So that's the Shere Khan from that live action Jungle Book. Oh, and then this one here. That one is depressing, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway. That is a vial or a vessel that has tiger bone wine in it. Because in Asia, in certain parts of Asia, tiger bone wine, tiger steaks are considered a delicacy and considered something that you consume if you're trying to sort of demonstrate your status. And we'll get into that a little bit more in a bit. Questions or comments before I move on? I know I could have had the Detroit Tigers on here. There's so many ways that I could have, so many things I could have put on the slide. Are we good? Okay. So you might not know this. I'm hoping you don't, because otherwise, I'm not sure why I'm up here. But tigers are big money. This is a tiger that is being used to sell gasoline. This is the tiger that is being used to sell cereal. So Tony the tiger, right? And then the other tiger, I don't think the Exxon tiger has a name. It's just a tiger. But we put a tiger in our tank, right? And both of these companies were happy but both of them started using the tigers in the 60s. And both were really happy with, okay, you can use the tiger to sell fuel, and we'll use the tiger to sell cereal. And that was cool. But you know what happened? Exxon started having tiger marts. So Exxon Corporation started to try to sell food using tigers. And Kellogg's Corporation was like, no, it's okay for you to use them to sell fuel, but it is not okay for you to use them to sell food. That's what we do. This made it all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court chose in 2000, they declined to actually review the ruling from an appeals court. And so it went back down to the appeals court ruling, and that was that Kellogg's can use it for food and Exxon can use it for oil, but not for food. So you may not know this, but all those tiger marts disappeared, and that's partly why. So tigers are big money. But let's think in terms of wild tigers for a little bit, because all that stuff we just chatted about is tiger, kind of culturally appropriated tiger stuff, right? The imagery, the icons, all that is actually what we typically surround ourselves with, not real tigers, because that would be dangerous. But we really love their imagery, and we really love what they represent. But wild tiger populations, the story is a little bit different. So what you see on the slide here is this is Asia, and then the light yellow is the tiger's past range. And what I want you to notice is they went all the way over into the Middle East. So tigers went all the way over into the Middle East. Incidentally, lions came all the way over into India, which is why there's a remnant lion population in one park in India. Anyway, the orange, the dark orange, that's where we find tigers today, okay? And this little blob here, this is Russian tigers. So this would be where you'd find the Siberian, or what's now called often the Amur tiger. And then China would be the Indo-Chinese tiger. The Bengal would be over here. Down here would be some of the island tigers, which of course used to have a much, much broader range, okay? Yeah. Any questions or comments about where tigers used to range, and put that at about 1900. And then today, and a couple of more things to say about this is the numbers of tigers this is pretty much about, the numbers are about 7% of the numbers that we saw in 1900. So our tiger population has dropped by that much. Why were tigers so heavily affected in the late 1800s, early 1900s? It had a lot to do with people hunting them for sport, in particular the Maharajas and the British would hunt these tigers for sport. And some of these guys, like these British guys, they'd go out on a week and they'd kill, 20 tigers. Trying to think if there's anything else. Right. So a couple other things I want to say about this really quickly is that because these guys live in what you can now tell are, with a few exceptions, isolated pockets, there isn't what scientists call a lot of gene flow from pocket to pocket. Now that would be fine if the numbers in a particular location, a particular population, was large enough that that it was sustainable and that the genetic makeup of the population was also sustainable. But if in these tiny spots you have low tiger numbers and it's just fragments, that's most likely going to be groups of tigers that are not sustainable and are going to have low genetic diversity. And that means those populations aren't going to be stable over the long term. I'm going to also point out here that India, it doesn't look like it's so much because that's more range than numbers, but India actually, of the 4,000 to 5,000 tigers that we think of being wild or free ranging right now, about 3,000 of them are in India. So then, more about these tigers, and I can't read my own slide because it's further away than I'm used to. I have to cheat. All right, yeah, so 4,500 to 5,000 tigers is our current estimate. You'll find different numbers in different places depending on what you look for. I typically always go to the IUCN red list to get what I think is going to be the best information I can on a particular animal or plant species that I'm looking up. About 70% of them are India, and of those tigers, about 75% of them are adults. So if we think about that population, it's not just 4,500 to 5,000 tigers. It's really less than that when you think about the effective population size and genetics. Okay? The interesting thing that has changed over the last 10 years is that we now just actually talk about 2 subspecies of tigers. We have the Panthera tigris, which is the one that would include the Bengal tiger, the Bengal tiger, the Siberian, Indo-Chinese, and Malayan. And then you have Panthera tigris sandica, and this one is the Sunda Island tiger. And it's essentially Sumatra, Bali, and Java. But Bali and Java, those are extinct. And so it's really just the Sumatran tigers. And if you look at the ones that are the other subspecies, the Indo-Chinese and is functionally extinct, and the Malayan tiger has also got really low numbers. So it's really, for that first tiger, it's the Bengals and the Amur tigers. And then for the other group, it's mainly the Sumatrans. One of my favorite tiger stories about this is, how many of you guys have heard of the island of Krakatoa? Yeah, so Krakatoa had a tiger, and then one day that island blew up in a big volcanic eruption, and the island disappeared, and so did the Krakatoan tigers. So it's not a fun story, I guess, but it's an interesting story. All right, so every day I get a news dump about what's happening with tigers, just in the news, random stuff. So obviously I hear a whole lot about Tiger King, or some celebrity has a pet tiger, but I also get other stories about tigers in different ways. I also get a whole lot, again, about sports teams named after tigers. So I keep meaning to go in there and change that search term just a tiny bit. But these are actual headlines that I run across, and I tried to focus this on new-ish headlines. One is on the old side, one is from yesterday. So if you look at that, I think it's the top one about the golden tiger. Let's see, yeah. Why the rare golden tiger photographed in India is worrying conservationists. When I first saw that, I thought, oh, they're worried because people are gonna wanna go see it and catch it. That's what I thought. I was wrong. They're worried because it's a very, very rare, and it's this guy here. This little blonde-looking tiger. It's a very rare color morph, and now they think it's because of genetic drift and population fragmentation that guy is, is there, and there's actually a couple of them. And then the other one is the melanistic tiger. You might hear the expression a black tiger. That darker tiger is what they're calling a black tiger. And this is sort of what I thought they were worried about with the golden one, because this is another animal where they're gonna start a safari so you can go see that particular tiger. So that'll be the reason to go on that safari, is to see this little cluster of these melanistic tigers in this one particular area. And then I have Yeah, so no telephone or mobile towers in tiger habitats. So one of the things that I see a lot is India in particular, but other countries as well, making decisions not to do some development project, like not to build a dam, not to put a road in, not to build these cell phone towers in an area where there are tigers. And one of the cool things about that, it goes back to the fact that in India, in 1973, Indira Gandhi actually created the Wildlife Protection Act, and it covers a lot of different wildlife species. And part of what came out of that is something called Project Tiger. So there's a really big push in India in particular to try to save the tiger and to try to live with the tiger. And that's really cool because it's about 40 or 50 people die every year from tiger attacks. The Indian government pays you about $4,000 to $5,000. If you're mauled badly, it's like $3,000 to $4,000. If your husband dies, you get $5,000. If they kill your cow, you'll get like $250. If they kill your goats, it's $150. But it's this concerted effort on the part of our government, of the Indian government, to continue to try to support the tigers that live within their country boundaries. I'm not sure why India is working so hard at this, because if you look at other animal species, you'll see the same thing. They just recently tried to reintroduce cheetahs into India. That didn't go very well, but it was this concerted effort to try again and repopulate or rewild these animals. I'm trying to think if there's anything else about that. Yeah, and I don't know if it's about a different cultural attitude towards nature and living with nature as opposed to living against nature. Just imagine for a moment here in this country, if 40 to 50 people got killed by tigers every single year, would we be like, oh, let's compensate the families? Or would we be like, they must go? Yeah. So you might notice, am I down to the last one? It's kind of old news now, but I just can't. Oh yeah. So here's an example though. They will kill a tiger if it keeps on killing people. So this tiger killed 9 people and they were like, okay, that's enough. And what's sad is he was 3 years old. So he's a very young tiger, but he managed to kill 9 people before he was killed because it was just, obviously this was his favorite prey and it wasn't really gonna change. But do you guys see the last headline? I love it so much. Vladimir Putin, there's a picture of him bare-chested holding tiger cubs, and they're his tiger cubs. And he was like, I am the conservation, whatever his name is in Russia, and I care about this and I care about these tigers, and we're gonna release these tigers and nothing bad better happen to them. 2 of them crossed a river into China and started killing things. Yes, ma'am. So according to Google, it's 3,200. But what I would like for you to do, since you're clearly really good at doing research and looking up things, there's a number of different numbers out there. But one of the most recent numbers from IUCN, which I personally think is pretty much the safest place to go to find the numbers, it's really more like 4,000. Yeah, but a lot of these tigers, they live in these huge areas where, how are we supposed to know? Does anybody know what technology has given us a better idea for how many tigers there are? Drones, possibly, yeah. Also camera trapping. So putting camera traps up has really improved our estimates, for sure. And I'm gonna give you more information after we're done if you would like. Yes, sir.
Are they larger than other tigers?
So Siberian tigers are now referred to as Amur tigers, but as I said, in terms of conservation, they've now been wrapped into that group with the Bengals. Because when I was a kid, or when I was, I don't know, even 20, or maybe even 30, or 40, we had like 5 different subspecies, right? But now they're just saying there's just the 2, which to me says these other subspecies, their numbers are too low to be sustainable over time. So now what we're doing is we're just focusing on the what were they called? The mainland tiger and then the island tiger. Yeah. Good question. Good comment. Anything else? So I wanted to talk about captive tigers too. And get ready, I'm about to ask you a crazy question in a little bit. So captive tigers inhabit a variety of spaces too. AZA stands for American Zoological Association, and WAZA is the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And these zoos, like if you're trying to decide what kind of zoo to go to or not go to zoos, if you decide, yeah, if they're doing conservation and they're doing research and they're educating people like North Carolina Zoo, that would be an AZA institution. And they house the tigers that are part of the conservation plan. So the captive breeding efforts that are directly related to the tigers that are in Asia would be in these zoos. And so here in North Carolina, those animals that would be directly related will be the Greensboro Science Center tigers, and then the new tigers that they're gonna be getting at North Carolina Zoo. You might say to yourself, but there's tigers at Carolina Tiger Rescue, and there's tigers at Tiger World, obviously. There's tigers at Zootastic Park. None of those tigers have any bearing on conservation at all. They're essentially mutt tigers that have been crossbred without regard for any kind of conservation focus at all. And they're just tigers we breed because we like tigers. And we like tigers, I think, kind of too much because they are adorable. Anyway, roadside zoos or commercial facilities are places that house tigers because you can get a tiger pretty cheap. And you can go see them. Some of these places in the past have allowed cub petting sessions or bottle feeding, and we'll look at some pictures of that in a bit. But not too long ago, like a year or so ago, our federal government, in part in response to Tiger King, the series, actually enacted a federal law that made it illegal to like touch and pet them. Now, it's one thing if you're working with them or for research or you're a biologist, but if you're just, hey, I want to bottle feed a baby tiger or I want to pet one, that's no longer legal. And that took a lot of effort to get passed. It's been sitting around for a number of years. And North Carolina has struggled with that. We actually tried to have our own state law saying you can't do that. But there was a lot of pushback from the commercial zoos in North Carolina that weren't on board with that at all. And it was super competitive, not competitive, sorry, super political. So also people have them as pets. Yeah. Anyway, they have them as pets. But I also want to tell you that there are livestock operations, I say livestock and I mean it, in South Africa, in several parts of Asia. There's livestock operations for tigers in China, in Thailand, in Laos, and they breed large numbers of tigers all the time to produce cubs and to produce new tigers for tiger bone wine, tiger meat, for entertainment purposes. How many people in here saw a video a couple of years ago of a bunch of tigers playing in the snow and attacking a drone? Did you see that? Right, so that video was quite popular because it was beautiful. These gorgeous, massive Siberian type tigers are just romping through the snow and this drone gets too low and they pull it down and attack it, kill it. But that was at a tiger farm. And that's the part that isn't shown in this video, is that it was actually a tiger farm and that these tigers were being bred for the purposes I described a little bit ago and not for conservation. So let me think. Yeah, we'll move on. So this is my question. My students have heard me ask this question. And I've asked this question of many people, and usually they're like, you're crazy. Here's the thing. domestication biology doesn't have anything to do with, it's not just what we want to domesticate. It's not just us going, I'm going to domesticate you because you seem like you'd be fun to domesticate, right? The domestication process can be driven by the animals themselves. It can also be something you're doing without realizing you're doing it. And really all it takes is breeding large numbers of whatever organism that we're talking about very rapidly and artificially selecting for the traits that we really kind of like, right? And so for the Asian tiger farms, that would be, well, we want to have the females that are prolific breeders and make cubs on a regular basis for us so that we can use for our business. Here in the US, it seems to be about, ooh, I really like them without stripes and bright white. So here what we have is this is a tiger farm in Thailand. And you can kind of tell it's like a livestock operation because you've just got pens and pens and pens of tigers, right? This up here is the front of a temple that you can go to, and again in Thailand, and you can interact with tigers for a price or a fee. And it actually got in pretty big trouble not too long ago because it was discovered that they had about 40 or 50 tiger cubs in a freezer. And they were like, oh, don't know how that happened. This one here is weird, if you can see it. These are lions and tigers and all kinds of stuff walking around together, and that is in South Africa. So that's a picture of one of the farms in South Africa, and South African government considers tigers and lions to be livestock. So seriously, are we? These are our color morphs. So when you're not breeding for conservation purposes and you're breeding for pretty colors, which we do with corn snakes, which we do with cats and dogs and horses and all kinds of stuff, look at the cool things. This is a normal one, or a natural. This is a golden tabby, which is a lot like that one that they found wild. And then here you have white with stripes. Here you have white without stripes. When I was a kid and I went to National Zoo, they had white tigers on display at their cat enclosure. And they had signs that talked about how this was the rare white tiger. And it was very much as if this was a conservation thing and that these tigers were actually, there were white tigers in the wild. And there are every now and again, just like there's a bunch of white deer that live in northern Durham, because they have a small population and they interbreed a whole lot, and so you got a lot of white and piebald deer up there. But what happened with us, or with these tigers that are in captivity, is that back in the 50s, there was a litter of cubs born from a female in India, captive cubs, and 2 of them were white. So what do you think they did? One was male and one was female. Let's keep trying to make these white ones because they're so cool looking. Right. So how many of you guys have been out to Carolina Tiger Rescue? Right. And how many of you seen the not so great white tiger with the clear genetic challenges? Exactly. Now, I'm not talking about those when I say, are we domesticating tigers? When I talk about that, I'm really talking about this group. These tigers that are in these livestock operations with large groups, and I mean large groups, 8,000 to 10,000 tigers. Okay? Here in the US, we have like 5,000 to 8,000, or not really sure because it's not as well regulated as it should be. But yeah, so essentially, you were saying 3,200 tigers were in the wild according to Google? Right. And then I'm saying, I think it's probably more like 4,000 to 5,000, but we can talk about that later. Or now. You know, that's a really good question. Do you want I'll give you what I think is happening. I think that those cubs were born and they had no plan for them, and so they just euthanized and froze them. And I know that's not a good story to tell, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened with them. right, there wouldn't be much meat on a tiger cub. I agree. They're a little bigger than a chicken nugget. But anyway, so I want you to know that I've talked to an evolutionary biologist, because I'm definitely not that. And he says I'm not crazy. He says the process that these animals are undergoing is not that different from the domestication process that has happened to other critters. And it's happening to other animals that you might not expect either, right? So corn snakes, has anybody got corn snakes on their list as getting domesticated? Yeah? What about bearded dragons? Yeah? Really? What color? Oh, that's good. That's a good. Live crickets? Good. A soft what? Belly? Oh, so you like to rub the. That's really cool. I'll have to check that out next time I'm around one. Anyway, now I've lost track because I'm thinking about the beardy belly. All kinds of snakes, Burmese pythons, etc., undergoing a domestication process. We even think raccoons that live in urban environments are in the early stages of domestication, if you talk to these guys. So I guess, let me finish this up. Am I getting close to, yeah, so let me finish up and then we'll just all talk. So I guess my point is, if you paid attention to my numbers, there's what? 15 to 20,000 tigers living in a captive environment, and there's what? If we go with her answer, 3,200 in the wild. So there's far more captive tigers right now than there are wild ones. And I asked this question. I teach a class called Human-Animal Interactions, and this class is all about the human-animal relationship, good, bad, and ugly. And I asked them, do we have room for apex predators? And we can just say tigers here. Do we have room for them? Most people think, when I ask that question, that I'm talking about, do we have room for them space-wise? It's like, well, how much? I don't know. A female tiger needs about 100 square kilometers, and a male tiger needs about 200 to 300 square kilometers. Do we have room for that? But I think what I'm really trying to talk about is, do we have room for them in our hearts? Do we have room for them to be part of the planet? Because we need to make that decision pretty quickly, right? We don't have a lot of time to waste, unless we just want to have livestock tigers and Kate Spade bags. So I was worried, because I'm new at this, I was worried about whether or not I had everything sourced correctly. So this is my jumbled list of sources. And one of them is from Etsy, and I even wrote the Etsy guy to see if it would be okay to use that picture. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak here tonight, and I cannot wait to hear what else we talk about.
Let's give Jenny a round of applause. Thank you very much. Well, we've already had lots of questions, so I know that we've got more. The way that we'll do the conversation from here on is just wave at me like that. That was a great job. Just wave at me. I'll bring you a microphone. That makes sure that everybody in the room can hear everything that's being said, including our live stream viewers. And we'll start right here in front row.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. Mary and I have been to Carolina Tiger Rescue many times, and in the opening talks that they give, they emphasize that tigers are wild animals, even though they look friendly and cuddly, and even if they were raised by humans, they are still wild animals, and you can't ignore, you can't just turn your back on them. They have a large enclosure there where there's a male and female tiger, brother and sister, and usually they're just kind of laying around and looking. But I saw the female take off running. It was very frightening because she went full speed running across the enclosure up to the fence, and I wondered, oh, is the door open or something? But But it turned out there was a little Indian boy. There was an Indian couple that had a little boy, he was about 3 or 4 years old. And he had his back to the the cage.
Oh, I can stalk him.
And it must have triggered the predator response because, hey, I remember these things. They're delicious. And it was very frightening, but it emphasized that, no, they can turn on you in a minute. Even Loki, I don't know how big Loki was when you said goodbye, but you couldn't approach him today. I don't know if
Oh,
it's
no,
alive.
no. And I just so you know, I tracked Loki down. There's other animals in my life I've tracked down. She ended up at Kings Island in Ohio. She's dead now, but obviously that's where she ended up. She lived a good life. Let me just say a couple things about Carolina Tiger Rescue. So it is a rescue. It is also known as a sanctuary. It's a federally recognized sanctuary. They do not breed. They only house animals until they pass away. And so those animals aren't counted in the conservation piece at all either. But what do we do with these animals when 2 tigers are found running around on I-40, near Charlotte? What do we do when a tiger gets found in an empty building in some house in, I can't remember, I think it was Fort Worth? What do we do when somebody has a full-grown tiger in their apartment in the Bronx? And so that's why we have all these sanctuaries now, because this has become such a big problem, and it's like, where do we put them? So, yes, ma'am. I forgot to look that up. Somebody could could go get her to Google that for me. I have a Google request for you. Can you tell me an average wild tiger lifespan and then maybe an average captive tiger lifespan?
Okay, my question is about white tigers. Are they albinos?
They're not. They don't have red or bluish eyes. Actually, I'm not quite sure. But so being albino means you don't make any pigment at all, right? You probably already knew that. And I'm trying to think with the full whites if they're albino or not. So I'm not 100% sure. So Mary, you want to say that out loud?
I volunteer at the Carolina Tiger Rescue. White tigers are not actually albino. It's a recessive gene. So they don't have the gene for the orange color. So white tigers actually all have blue eyes and brown stripes.
Thank you.
All right, I think we got an answer on tiger lifespan.
Cool.
Apparently, in the wild, it's 10 to 15 years in the wild, but it's actually 20 to 22 years in captivity.
Yeah, that's really good. Nice job for sleuthing for us. So, and that's not a big surprise to me because there are animals that can live quite a bit longer in captivity than they do in the wild. Jaguars, 3 to 4 years, maybe 6 if they're lucky in the wild, but they can live quite a long time in captivity. Lemurs, also, they don't live that long in the wild, but they can live to 20 or 30 years old if you give them the right kibble and they're happy where they are.
Well, yeah, this is just a quick question. You may not know the answer, but how many cubs are born in the litters of tigers?
It depends on if it's a wild or a domestic, there I go, or a captive. Typically like 2 to 4, but there is actually right now a tigress out there that has 6 cubs that are following her. I saw it in my little news thing. So, but typically like 2 to 4. And it's a lot of work. And that's another problem with tigers is that when you think in terms of life history, it's a while before they're old enough to have offspring, and then they can't have offspring that often. And anytime an animal is in that situation, it's going to be more vulnerable to conservation pressures or, the things that might keep them from breeding and producing offspring. So, yeah. Anything else?
I'm curious, because you talked about tigers being farmed, tigers as livestock. Do livestock tigers, are they used for these, like the bone wine, tiger bone, or other products, other animal products?
Right.
Or is it only wild tigers?
So the tigers, it's really weird. So the tiger farms in China, they always have an entertainment feature too. So you can go visit them like a zoo. They might actually throw some tigers in a ring with a some sort of a goat or something so that you can actually pay to see them kill the goat, but they don't because nobody taught them how to hunt. So then, so the females breed the cubs grow up, and then these animals are out there, and once they're harvested, and I don't know what market weight is for the tigers, but once they're harvested, the penis is collected because that's used as medicinal. The skins go to northern China, where there is a cultural group that likes to wear them for a lot of ceremonial purposes. The bones go into these big vats, and then they get, infused with alcohol. I have no idea how it tastes, but apparently it's quite popular and very expensive. One sad thing about this is one would think that these farms would lessen the pressure on wild tigers, but unfortunately, it has now created this, oh, but I'm drinking wild tiger wine, not captive tiger wine. So it actually has increased the poaching pressure on tigers, not decreased it. Crazy.
Have you seen evidence that the Indian government's conservation measures towards tigers, the incentive programs, habitat protection programs, that those are having an impact on things like poaching for wild tigers?
Numbers in tigers in India are going up, and everybody's talking about how great that is, but the thing that's now happening is those tigers are, I just told you 100 square kilometers of room is needed, 200 or 300 for a male. If they're having their babies and they're doing well, that means they're going to be pushing out of their protected areas and becoming more of a problem for the people that live with them, right? Imagine if when you went out with your toddlers and they were all wrapped up in their snowsuits, and to get them into the minivan, you actually had to worry about whether or not tigers were going to be out there at the same time. We would not tolerate that. So, yeah, it's pretty remarkable what the Indian government is doing. It's also super political and hard for me to follow sometimes, but it's true. Another place that has really good tiger policies is Nepal. And there's a fairly healthy, sustainable population in Nepal. So, oh my God, it's Mateus. I'm always afraid when Mateus raises his hand.
Let me bring you a microphone.
Has there been any efforts for wild habitat corridors or connections between these fragmented populations of tigers for them to connect?
Right, and so corridor research, we can thank, does anybody in here know who Dr. Nick Haddad is? He is an ecologist he was at NC State, and he's a world-renowned ecologist, and one of his big lines of research is how big do corridors need to be for plants, for animals, for spiders, for tigers, or whatever. So a lot of his corridor research has been applied to tigers, and a lot of the camera trapping stuff that like Roland Kays and people here at the museum are involved in. That's why it's happening over there now, and they have a much better idea for how many tigers they have. On that note, I had one other detail. Ulas Karanth and his daughter Prithi Karanth are two huge tiger biologists in India. And Ulas actually worked with Dr. Roger Powell, who's another name that some people might recall, but he has since retired, and he was a really prominent mammologist. And mainly his work was with bears and wolves, but Ulas learned a whole lot from Dr. Roger Powell here at NC State that he then applied to the work that they did in India to kind of modernize their management program. So.
And you told us that you'd been, oh wait, what did I miss?
I got my earrings at Vaguely Reminiscent in Durham. They have the best animal earrings ever. Huh?
Are they tigers? Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. I try to wear a different animal every day, and this seemed appropriate.
And so you told us earlier that you've been tracking tiger news for a long time. You've been thinking about tigers for a long time and keeping up with what's going on. So how do you feel about the future for tigers? As all of our students grown, okay. That was a good question then. That'll definitely get us 5 more minutes.
I will say this. I had a student ask me one time after class, "Are you going to make me cry every day?" And I said, yes, I will if you're going to cry that easily. But I also said, you guys need to know this stuff. You guys need to know this stuff because, you need to get out there and do some work. This young lady needs to get out there and save turtles because there's tons of turtles that are, very, very endangered. And a lot of people don't even know. They're like, turtle. But in reality, yeah. So I am cautiously optimistic. How's that?
I'll take it.
Okay.
Everybody, let's give Jenny one more round of applause.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you listening.
Thanks for being here, Dr. Campbell. Thanks to all of you for coming out to the Science Cafe tonight. Hope that you enjoyed tonight's Science and Stories. We'll be back here with another Science Cafe, again, third Thursday of March. That's March 21st, and you don't want to miss it because it's NC State University's Brain Night at the museum. So we'll have about 24 special exhibits on the first floor outside the cafe here. We'll have student neuroscientists giving presentations inside the Globe from 6 to 7. And then at 7 o'clock, we're going to be hanging out with the College of Veterinary Medicine's Dr. Natasha Olby, who studies canine cognition and dementia. Don't miss it. Super special, super fun night. Everything gets started at 6 p.m. on March 21st. I hope I'll see you here for the Science Cafe again. Good night, everybody.